The first rule they gave me before I boarded the ship was repeated so many times it stopped sounding like a warning and started sounding like a bad joke. Don't touch anything you don't understand. Don't speak unless spoken to. And under absolutely no circumstances, do not touch the Queen. I remember nodding like a responsible adult, as if I had any intention of doing something as ridiculous as touching a galactic ruler. I was a maintenance technician, not an idiot. My job was simple. Fix a minor energy fluctuation in a system that was probably older than my entire planet's recorded history, collect my pay, and leave without becoming a historical footnote titled, "Human Who Made a Terrible Decision." Simple jobs, in my experience, were the ones most likely to end badly. The ship itself didn't help calm my nerves. It wasn't just large. It was impossibly large, the kind of structure that made you question whether someone had accidentally built a city and then decided to call it a vehicle. The walls shimmered with soft, shifting light, like they couldn't decide what color they wanted to be. Symbols slid across the surfaces in silent patterns, rearranging themselves every few seconds, as if the ship was quietly thinking. I tried not to stare, which naturally resulted in me staring at everything. "Stop looking confused," I muttered to myself. "You look like a tourist." "Clarification," my translator chirped in my ear. "Tourist, an individual who is lost and financially irresponsible." "Thank you," I whispered. "Very helpful." The guards escorting me didn't react, but I had a strong feeling they were judging me anyway. They were tall, armored, and completely silent, which is never a comforting combination. Their helmets concealed their faces, but their posture alone said everything. They were not here to help me fix anything. They were here to make sure I didn't do something stupid, which, statistically speaking, was not a reassuring setup. We reached a set of massive doors that made the rest of the ship look modest. They didn't slide open like the others. They unfolded slowly and deliberately, as if they were aware that whatever lay beyond them deserved a proper introduction. The air shifted the moment they opened, warmer and heavier, carrying a faint metallic scent that reminded me of storms back home. I took one step inside and immediately regretted every life choice that had led me there. The chamber was enormous, but it didn't feel empty. It felt focused, like every line, every surface, every piece of architecture pointed toward a single place, and at the center of it, seated with effortless stillness, was her. At first glance, she looked human enough to trick your brain into relaxing. Pale skin, sharp features, eyes that reflected the ambient light like polished glass. But then your gaze lingered, and the differences revealed themselves. Her ears were long, elegant, slightly curved, framing her face in a way that felt both natural and completely alien. There was a precision to her posture, a controlled stillness that made every small movement feel deliberate. She wasn't just sitting on the throne. She was the reason the throne existed. I realized I had stopped walking. "Continue," my translator whispered helpfully, as if I needed the reminder. "Right," I murmured, forcing my legs to cooperate. Every step felt louder than it should have. I was painfully aware of my own breathing, my own heartbeat, the way my boots echoed against the floor. This was not my environment. This was not even remotely my level of responsibility. Somewhere, someone had made a mistake assigning me to this task. I was certain of it. I reached the designated console and crouched beside it, focusing on the exposed energy conduit. It flickered faintly, the light pulsing in uneven intervals. Good. A problem I understood. Something predictable. Something that didn't involve accidentally offending an entire civilization. "Minor fluctuation," I said, mostly to myself. "Nothing dramatic." My translator repeated it aloud in their language, and I immediately winced. There was a pause behind me. "You speak," her voice said, calm and clear. I froze for half a second before remembering that freezing was probably not a good survival strategy. Slowly, I turned my head just enough to acknowledge her without fully facing her. That felt like the safest compromise my brain could come up with under pressure. "Only when necessary," I replied carefully. Then after a brief moment, I added, "Or when I'm nervous." Another pause. "And which is this?" she asked. "Very much the second one," I said. Silence followed, but it wasn't the suffocating kind. It felt attentive, like she was studying the answer instead of judging it. I turned back to the console quickly, pretending to be extremely interested in a panel that, moments ago, I would have described as aggressively uninteresting. My hands moved with practiced precision, adjusting the conduit, recalibrating the field regulator. This was familiar territory. This was safe. Just fix the thing, I muttered under my breath. Don't say anything else. Don't do anything else. Be invisible. Clarification, my translator offered again. You are currently not invisible. I know, I whispered. That's the problem. Behind me, I thought I heard the faintest shift in her posture, like the beginning of a movement she hadn't quite decided to complete. And for some reason, that made me more nervous than anything else in the room. The longer I stayed crouched in front of that panel, the more I became aware of a very specific and uncomfortable fact. She hadn't looked away. You can feel it when someone is watching you. It's subtle, like a pressure that doesn't belong to gravity. And right then, that pressure was very real, very focused, and very much centered on me. Okay, I muttered quietly, tightening a calibration ring that absolutely did not need tightening. Just a normal day. Fix the thing. Don't die. Maybe get paid. Clarification, my translator chimed in. Probability of death remains. Stop calculating that, I whispered sharply. I adjusted the conduit again, watching the light stabilize slightly. The system responded well, which should have been reassuring, but instead it made me suspicious. Systems that behaved too well were usually hiding something. I leaned in closer, scanning the data stream as it flowed across the interface in elegant, alien symbols. The translator struggled to keep up, replacing entire sequences with vague approximations like energy thing and important fluctuation. Great, I sighed under my breath. Very precise. Behind me, her voice came again, smooth and steady. You speak to yourself often. I hesitated, then shrugged slightly, even though she couldn't see the gesture from my angle. It helps me keep track of the conversation. There is no conversation, she replied. There is from my side, and I said. It's just mostly me. A brief pause followed. I risked a glance over my shoulder. She was still watching, but there was something different now. Something faint, almost imperceptible. If I didn't know better, I'd say it looked like curiosity slowly turning into interest. That was somehow worse. I turned back to the console quickly, deciding that the safest place for my attention was anywhere that wasn't her face. The conduit flickered again, slightly sharper this time. Not a failure, but not stable either. I tapped the interface, bringing up a deeper diagnostic layer. Lines of data unfolded, more complex, more detailed, and far less translated. All right, I murmured. Let's pretend I understand this. Do you not? She asked immediately. I blinked. Of course she heard that. Of course she did. I understand enough, I said carefully. The rest is interpretation. Interpretation, she repeated, as if testing the word. You repair systems you do not fully understand. Welcome to my profession, I said. If we waited until we understood everything, nothing would ever get fixed. There was another pause. I adjusted a small control node, watching the energy flow smooth out slightly. The rhythm of it became more predictable, like a heartbeat finding its pace. That was good. Predictable was good. Predictable meant I could leave this room without becoming an example. Your kind accepts uncertainty, she said. I smiled faintly. We don't have much choice. For a moment, the only sound in the chamber was the quiet hum of the system and the distant, almost imperceptible vibration of the ship itself. It felt like standing inside something alive, something vast enough that my entire existence barely registered as a detail. I wiped my hands on my uniform out of habit, then immediately regretted it. The fabric suddenly felt very inappropriate for a royal chamber. Too plain, too human. Focus, I muttered. Clarification, the translator whispered. You appear to be losing. I am not losing focus, I hissed softly. I am managing it aggressively. I reached deeper into the panel, adjusting the alignment of a secondary regulator. The moment my fingers made contact, the system reacted. A brief pulse of light, sharper than before, running along the conduit like a ripple. I froze for a fraction of a second, then continued carefully, pretending that hadn't almost startled me into a career-ending mistake. Behind me, I heard the faintest shift again. Not movement, exactly. More like a tension sharpening. "You are cautious," she observed. "I'm alive," I replied. "Those two things are usually connected." Another pause. Then unexpectedly, "Most who enter this chamber do not speak as you do." "That's because most people have better instincts than I do," I said. I risked another glance back. This time her expression had changed just enough to be noticeable. It wasn't amusement, not quite, but it wasn't the distant neutrality from before either. It was something in between, something forming. That made my stomach tighten in a completely different way. "Don't get interesting," I told myself quietly. "Interesting is dangerous." "Clarification," the translator began. "Not now," I whispered. I turned back to the console, focusing harder than before. The system was stabilizing, but not fully. There was still a subtle irregularity, a hesitation in the flow that didn't match the rest of the pattern. I traced it carefully, following the data as it branched into a secondary channel. "There you are," I murmured. "A small misalignment, deeper than the initial issue. Easy to miss if you weren't looking for it. Easy to ignore if you didn't care about perfection." I adjusted the alignment slowly, carefully, feeling the system respond beneath my fingertips. The light along the conduit smoothed out, the flicker fading into a steady glow. For the first time since I entered the chamber, I felt something close to relief. "Almost done," I said. "Almost," she echoed. There was something in the way she said it that made the word feel heavier than it should have been. I frowned slightly, glancing at the readings again. Everything looked stable. Everything felt stable, which in my experience meant something was about to go wrong. I've learned something important about advanced alien technology. If everything suddenly starts working perfectly, it's lying to you. The readings in front of me were too clean. The fluctuations were gone. The energy flow smooth. The system humming like it had never known a problem in its entire existence. It was beautiful. Suspiciously beautiful. The kind of beauty that makes you check your pockets afterward to see what got stolen. "Yeah, no," I muttered. "Clarification," my translator said. "You are expressing distrust toward a functioning system." "Yes," I whispered, "because I would like to continue existing." I leaned closer, narrowing my eyes at the data stream. The main conduit was stable, but there, just beneath the surface, a secondary pattern flickered. It was subtle, almost hidden, like something pretending not to be there. "You are not done," she said behind me. I exhaled slowly. "No, it just wants me to think I am." "Why would a system do that?" "Because it hates me personally," I said. "All machines do." There was a brief silence. Then very quietly, "That is illogical." "So am I," replied. I reached deeper into the panel, sliding my hand past the primary regulator toward a narrow cluster of crystalline nodes embedded in the inner frame. They pulsed faintly, out of sync with the rest of the system. That was the problem. Not a failure, not exactly, more like a disagreement. "All right," I murmured, "let's settle this." I adjusted the first node carefully. The pulse shifted, slightly more aligned. Good. I moved to the second. The system reacted instantly. A sharp surge of energy shot through the conduit, brighter and faster than before. The panel vibrated under my hand, the light flaring into a brief, blinding flash. "Ah," I said. "There it is." The surge didn't stop. It built, rising in intensity, the smooth flow collapsing into something erratic and unpredictable. The symbols on the interface scrambled, rearranging too quickly for the translator to keep up. "Clarification," it said. "This is bad," I finished. "This is very bad." I pulled my hand back instinctively, but the panel jolted again, sending a sharp pulse through the frame. My balance shifted before I could correct it, and then gravity, which had been perfectly cooperative up until that exact moment, decided to take a break. I stumbled backward. There's a very specific kind of panic that happens when you realize you are falling in the worst possible direction. My brain had just enough time to process the situation in a beautifully unhelpful sequence. Step 1, you are falling. Step 2, you are falling toward the Queen. Step 3, this is how you die. I regret everything, I said. And then I collided with her. My hand hit her side. Firm, undeniable contact. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened, which was somehow worse. Then the room changed. The guards moved so fast they blurred, weapons activating with a sharp, synchronized hiss that cut through the air like a blade. One of them grabbed me before I could even attempt to recover, wrenching my arm behind my back with precise, practiced force. My feet barely touched the ground as I was forced down, the world tilting sideways in a way that felt deeply unfair. "Do not move," a voice snapped. This time the translator didn't bother softening the tone. "I wasn't planning to," I said quickly. "Moving seems like a bad strategy right now." The grip on my arm tightened slightly, as if to confirm that observation. My heart was racing, my thoughts scrambling to catch up with reality. I had done it. Not on purpose, not even remotely intentionally, but that didn't matter. I had broken the rule, the one rule, the only rule that had been made painfully, repeatedly clear. Don't touch the queen. Okay, I muttered. This is fixable. Maybe, probably not, but let's stay optimistic. Clarification, the translator began. Not helping, I whispered. The chamber was silent except for the low hum of the unstable system still flickering behind me. No one moved. No one spoke. The guards held their positions waiting for her. I forced myself to look up. She hadn't moved from her throne, but everything about her felt different. Her gaze was fixed on me, sharper than before, focused in a way that made it impossible to look away. There was no immediate anger, no visible sign of outrage, but there was something else, something far more difficult to understand. Recognition. That didn't make any sense. "I can explain," I said quickly. "It was the system. It surged. I slipped. Gravity betrayed me. There's a whole sequence of events here that really makes me look less stupid than I currently seem." No one reacted. Of course, no one reacted. "Also," I added, because apparently my survival instincts had decided to take a creative approach, "if it helps, I didn't mean to touch you. That was entirely accidental. Very respectful accident." One of the guards shifted slightly, and I was fairly certain that was the closest I was going to get to a warning shot. I swallowed, deciding that silence might finally be the correct choice. The seconds stretched, heavy and unforgiving. Then she spoke. "Release him." The words were calm, effortless. The effect was immediate. The guard holding me hesitated, just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough to feel the shift in the room. Confusion, brief and subtle, rippled through the otherwise perfect discipline. "My queen," the guard said carefully. "He has—" "I am aware," she replied. There was no change in her tone, no increase in volume. She didn't need it. The grip on my arm loosened. Then it was gone. I stayed exactly where I was for a moment, not because I was being cautious, but because my brain hadn't caught up with the fact that I was still alive. "That's, unexpected," I said quietly. No one laughed. I pushed myself up slowly, raising my hand slightly in what I hoped was a non-threatening, non-accidentally touching anyone gesture. "I would like to formally state," I said, "that I am done touching things." This time there was a pause that felt different, not tense, not hostile, just different. Her gaze remained on me, steady and unreadable. "You touched me," she said. I nodded once. "Yes, briefly, regretfully, with excellent timing, considering the circumstances." Another pause. Then very slightly her head tilted. And for the first time since I had entered that chamber, I realized something far more dangerous than execution might be happening. She wasn't angry. She was interested. There is a very specific kind of silence that follows a mistake so large, it should have ended you. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels like the universe is pausing, double-checking the rules, and trying to figure out if it forgot something. That was the silence I was standing in. My arm still tingled from where the guard had grabbed me, my balance slightly off, my brain running several parallel calculations that all ended with the same conclusion. I should not still be alive. "I feel like there has been a procedural error," I said carefully. No one answered. Of course, no one answered. The guards had stepped back, but not far. Their weapons were still active, humming faintly, angled just enough to remind me that my continued existence was very much conditional. I could practically hear their internal systems arguing with themselves. Rule violation detected. Punishment required. Awaiting override. And the override was sitting right in front of me, looking at me like I had just done something fascinating instead of incredibly stupid. You touched me, she repeated. Yes, I said. We've established that. I'm not planning on making it a habit. Her gaze didn't waver. Do you understand the significance of that action? I understand that it's generally followed by consequences, I replied. Severe ones. And yet you did not hesitate. I blinked. I fell. You did not freeze. I panicked efficiently. There was a pause. A long one. The kind that makes you reconsider every decision you've made since childhood. Then very slightly the corner of her mouth shifted. Not a full expression, not even something I was entirely sure I had seen correctly. But it was there. I stared at her for a second too long before remembering that staring at powerful alien rulers was probably still not recommended behavior. Right, I muttered, looking anywhere else. No eye contact. Very important. Clarification, my translator whispered. You are currently making eye contact. I am aware, I said under my breath. I'm failing under pressure. One of the guards shifted again, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was going. I couldn't blame them. If I were in their position, I'd also be questioning why the human who just broke the most sacred rule in existence was still standing there talking. I will ask again, she said, her voice steady but quieter now, more focused. Why did you not hesitate? I hesitated this time, mostly because I didn't have a clever answer ready. The truth was simple, but it didn't feel like the kind of answer that would survive scrutiny. Because I didn't have time to think, I said finally. Where I come from, if you stop to analyze every situation, you usually end up reacting too late. That is inefficient, she said. It's survival, I replied. Another pause, but this one felt different. Less like judgment, more like consideration. Behind me, the system let out a faint, uneven hum, as if it had remembered it was still broken and wanted to contribute to the situation. I turned slightly, glancing back at the panel. The energy flow was still unstable, though less violently so than before. Also, I added, gesturing vaguely toward it, that's still a problem. For a moment, no one reacted. Then one of the guards spoke, his voice low and controlled. The system can be repaired later. Yes, I said, assuming we're all still here later. He didn't respond to that, which honestly felt like confirmation. The Queen's gaze shifted briefly toward the panel, then back to me. You believe it remains unstable. I know it remains unstable, I said. It's pretending to behave, but it's not convinced yet. Kind of like me. Clarification, the translator offered. You are comparing yourself to a malfunctioning system. I am making a very accurate comparison, I whispered. She watched me for a moment longer, then spoke again. Continue. I blinked. Continue existing? Continue your repair, she said. I stared at her, then at the panel, then back at her. You want me to fix it, I said slowly. You were assigned to do so. Yes, I said, before I committed what I assume is a highly punishable offense. And yet, she said, you are still here. That's the confusing part, I admitted. Another brief pause. Then, almost imperceptibly, then do not waste it. I exhaled slowly, turning back toward the console. My hands hovered over the panel for a second, my brain catching up with the situation. I had just violated a fundamental law of an alien empire, nearly been restrained permanently, and now I was being told to get back to work like this was a minor inconvenience. Okay, I muttered. Sure, why not? Let's just proceed as if this is normal. Clarification, the translator said. This is not normal. I know, I said. That's what makes it normal for me. I reached into the panel again, more carefully this time, adjusting the misaligned nodes with deliberate precision. The system responded, the unstable pulse smoothing out gradually, reluctantly. It was like convincing something stubborn to cooperate. Behind me, I could still feel her attention, steady and unwavering. But it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't distant observation anymore. It was focused, deliberate. Curious, dangerously curious. And for reasons I couldn't fully explain, that made my hands just slightly less steady than they had been before. If there was one thing I trusted even less than alien technology pretending to work, it was alien technology behaving politely after trying to kill me. The system had calmed down, at least on the surface. The pulses were steady now, the light flowing through the conduit in smooth, controlled waves. It looked perfect again, which meant it was probably planning something. "All right," I muttered, leaning closer. "Let's see what you're hiding this time." "Clarification," my translator said. "You are addressing the system as if it possesses intent." "It absolutely does," I whispered. "Malicious intent." Behind me, I heard a faint shift. Fabric, or armor, or something softer. Not the guards. They moved like machines. This was quieter, more deliberate. "You assign motive to inanimate constructs," she said. I didn't turn around this time. That felt like progress. "I assign motive to anything that can ruin my day." "And has it ruined your day?" I considered that. "It's trying very hard." I adjusted a secondary node, watching the internal readings fluctuate slightly. Not dangerously, but enough to confirm what I suspected. The system wasn't failing anymore. It was compensating, holding itself together through a series of micro-adjustments that weren't designed to last. "You're overcorrecting," I murmured. "That's not sustainable." "Clarification," the translator echoed. "System instability persists at—" "I know," I said. "I can see it." "You speak to it as though it listens," she said again. "Everything listens," I replied. "Some things just don't admit it." There was a pause, not the tense kind, not the judgmental kind. This one felt closer. I frowned slightly, glancing at the reflection on the surface of the panel. The angle was distorted, the light bending just enough to turn shapes into suggestions. But I could still see her. She wasn't on the throne anymore. That realization hit me a second too late. "Don't react," I told myself. "Reacting is how you make this worse." "Clarification," the translator whispered. "Your heart rate has increased." "Not now," I muttered. I focused harder on the panel, pretending that I hadn't noticed anything. My hands moved carefully, recalibrating the deeper alignment points, adjusting the energy distribution so the system would stop fighting itself. "You are more cautious now," she said. I swallowed. Experience is a powerful teacher. "Your earlier behavior did not reflect caution." "My earlier behavior involved falling," I said. "I try not to repeat that." Another step. I didn't hear it, but I felt it. Closer now. The pressure of her presence wasn't behind me anymore. It was beside me. I kept my eyes on the panel. This was fine. Everything was fine. I was fixing a system while standing next to the most powerful being in the galaxy who I had accidentally touched. This was a completely normal situation. "You continue your task," she said. "You told me to," I replied. "I'm very good at following instructions after I break important rules." "Clarification," the translator added. "You have broken at least one significant rule." "I am aware," I said. "Thank you for the reminder." The system pulsed again, softer this time. The instability was nearly gone, the internal flow settling into a balanced rhythm. It felt right. Not perfect, but honest. "There," I murmured. "That's better." "You are certain?" she asked. "No," I said immediately, "but I'm confident enough to stop touching it." I leaned back slightly, pulling my hands away from the panel, as if it might change its mind and attack me again. The light remained steady. The hum evened out, blending into the background noise of the ship. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, against my better judgment, I turned my head. She was closer than I expected. Not threateningly close, not even uncomfortably close. Just close enough that I could see the fine details I had missed before. The subtle variations in her skin, the precise curve of her features, the way her long ears framed her face with an elegance that felt almost intentional, like a design choice rather than biology. Her eyes were focused on me, not with authority, not with distance, but with something far more complicated. "You observe," she said quietly. "I try not to," I replied. "I'm not very successful." "Why?" I hesitated. Because you're different? That is an insufficient explanation. It's the best one I have, I said. Where I come from, when something doesn't fit into what we expect, we look at it until it makes sense. And do I make sense? I let out a small breath. Not even a little. There was a pause, then, very slightly, she stepped closer. Not enough to touch. Just enough to make the space between us feel smaller. My brain, which had been doing a decent job of staying functional up until this point, decided to panic again. Okay, I said, raising one hand instinctively, palm open, as if that would somehow clarify the situation. I would like to officially state that I am not moving. I am staying exactly where I am. Why? She asked. Because the last time I moved unexpectedly, it did not go well. Clarification, the translator said. Previous movement resulted in... I remember, I interrupted. Her gaze didn't shift. You fear repeating the action? I fear the consequences, I said. And yet, she said, her voice softer now, more deliberate. You did not fear them before. That was before I understood them, I replied. Another pause. Then something changed. Not in the room, not in the system, in her. It was subtle, almost impossible to define, but I felt it. A shift in the way she looked at me, less like a subject, less like a mistake, more like a question she hadn't decided how to answer yet. There are moments in life when you realize the situation has quietly shifted into something far more complicated than it has any right to be. This was one of those moments. The system was stable. The guards were still watching. The laws of the empire had not changed. And yet somehow, everything felt different. Mostly because the queen was standing far closer to me than any sensible rule book would allow. I kept my hands exactly where they were, visible still, and very much not touching anything. I had learned my lesson. Once was an accident. Twice would probably be considered a declaration of war. You are thinking, she said. I am always thinking, I replied. Right now it's just louder than usual. What do you think about? I hesitated. There were several possible answers. None of them felt safe. Survival, I said finally. It's a popular topic where I'm from. Is your survival currently threatened? I gave a small, careful smile. That depends on how this conversation goes. There was a pause. Not uncomfortable, not hostile, just present. You speak as if danger is familiar to you, she said. It is, I replied. Not this kind of danger, though. Back home, it's usually simpler. Gravity, machinery, occasionally my own decisions. Your decisions endanger you? Regularly, I said. I like to keep things consistent. For a moment, I thought I saw it again. That almost expression, that subtle shift at the edge of her composure. It was becoming easier to notice, which was probably a sign that I was paying far too much attention. You do not behave as others do, she said. I've been told that's a problem, I replied. It is not entirely a problem. That was new. I blinked, trying to process that without overthinking it. Overthinking it would definitely make it worse. Everything I'd done so far suggested that the less I analyzed, the better my chances of not accidentally breaking another intergalactic rule. Good, I said. I'm glad my poor behavior has at least some positive applications. Clarification, my translator added helpfully. Your behavior is categorized as... I don't need the category, I muttered. The silence that followed felt lighter this time. Still controlled, still precise, but no longer pressing down on me like before. It was strange. The room hadn't changed, the guards hadn't moved, the ship still hummed with the same quiet power, and yet the tension had shifted into something almost conversational. You said earlier, she continued, that your kind does not hesitate. Not always, I said. We hesitate plenty, just usually at the wrong time. And this was the correct time? This was the only time, I replied. There wasn't a decision to make. You act without decision. Sometimes that's the only way to act, I said. If you wait for certainty, you end up doing nothing. She considered that. I could see it in the way her gaze shifted. Not away, but inward, like she was turning the idea over, testing its structure. That is inefficient, she said again, though her tone was different now, less certain. Yeah, I said. We're very inefficient. We also tend to survive anyway. Clarification, the translator said. Human survival rate across. Please stop, I whispered. I leaned back slightly against the edge of the console, careful to keep my movements slow, predictable. The system behind me remained stable, its earlier instability now nothing more than a faint memory in the data stream. That should hold, I said, nodding toward the panel, unless it decides to develop a personality again. You believe it could. I believe anything can if it tries hard enough, I said. She stepped closer, just a fraction, but enough to make my brain immediately notice. This was becoming a pattern, a very dangerous pattern. You assign uncertainty to all things, she said. I live in uncertainty, I replied. It's kind of our natural environment. And yet, she said, her voice quieter now, you did not hesitate when you touched me. There it was again. That moment, the one thing I couldn't undo, couldn't explain properly, couldn't fit into a neat, logical answer. I didn't think, I said. That's the truth. That is not sufficient. It's all I have, I replied. She studied me for a long moment. Not like before, not distant, not analyzing from afar. This was closer, more direct. You felt no barrier, she said. I felt gravity, I said, very strongly. That is not what I mean. I hesitated, for real this time, because I understood what she meant. I just didn't have a clean way to explain it. Where I come from, I said slowly, people are just people. Titles matter, sure. Power matters. But in a moment like that, none of it really exists. You don't see a ruler or a symbol. You just see someone standing there. And that removes the boundary? It ignores it, I said. The silence that followed was different again. Heavier, but not in a threatening way. It felt like something had settled into place, like a piece of a larger structure had just clicked where it belonged. You ignore boundaries, she said. I respect them, I corrected. I just don't always have time to think about them. She took another step closer. This time I didn't move at all, didn't step back, didn't raise my hands, didn't even shift my weight. Because I was starting to realize something important. The danger wasn't in what I had done, it was in what was happening now. You are unusual, she said. I've been upgraded from problem to unusual, I said. I'll take it. Her gaze didn't waver, and for the first time since I had entered that chamber, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about what came next. The strange part wasn't that I had survived. It was that days later, I was still being asked to return. Not escorted like before, not surrounded by silent, heavily armed reminders of my place in the universe. Just summoned, politely, which in an interstellar empire built on strict hierarchy and unspoken rules, was far more unsettling than any threat. Clarification, my translator said as I walked through the now familiar corridor. You are expected. I was expected last time too, I muttered. That didn't go according to plan. This time the doors opened faster. Less ceremony. Or maybe I was just less distracted by the fact that I might not leave. The chamber hadn't changed. Same light, same structure, same impossible sense that the room itself was paying attention. But she wasn't on the throne. She was standing near the console, waiting. That's new, I said under my breath. You observe change, she said as if she had been expecting that exact reaction. I try to, I replied. It usually helps. I approached slowly, not because I was afraid, well, not entirely, but because I had learned something over the past few days. Not everything needed to be rushed. Not every moment needed to be reacted to immediately. Growth, terrifying concept. The system remains stable, she said. That's good, I nodded. Means I did my job right. You corrected its behavior, she said. I convinced it to stop arguing with itself, I replied. Temporary solution, like most things. She considered that, her gaze steady. You continue to return, she said. You keep asking, I answered. That is not the same. It kind of is where I come from, I said. When someone important asks, we usually show up. And you consider me important? I paused. That felt like a trap. Not a dangerous one, but a precise one. I consider you someone I shouldn't ignore, I said carefully. That earned me that almost expression again. I was starting to recognize it now. It wasn't amusement exactly. It was something quieter, something more deliberate. You have adapted, she said. I've learned, I replied. Slight difference. How so? Adapting is reacting, I said. Learning is choosing what to do next time. And what would you choose? I glanced at the console, then back at her. I try not to fall, I said. There was a pause. Then, finally, something changed. Not subtle this time. Not hidden behind control or distance. She laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't long. But it was real. And for a moment, the entire room felt different. That was not your worst outcome, she said. No, I admitted. Definitely not. Silence settled again, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It felt balanced, like the system behind me, finally running the way it was supposed to. There are those who believe you should have been punished, she said after a moment. I assume that, I replied. I'm still a little surprised I wasn't. They follow rules, she said. So do I said. Usually, just not fast enough. You broke a boundary, she continued. I tripped over it, I corrected. Another brief pause, then softer, and yet it changed something. I didn't answer immediately, because I knew she wasn't talking about the system. Yeah, I said eventually. It did. She stepped closer again, not cautiously this time, not testing the distance, just closing it. I didn't move, not because I was frozen, not because I was afraid, because I didn't need to. You no longer hesitate, she said. I still hesitate, I replied. I just don't let it stop me. Her gaze held mine, steady and clear. You see me differently, she said. I see you more clearly, I answered. And what do you see? I exhaled slowly, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to choose it carefully. Someone who isn't just a rule, I said. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of something that hadn't been there before. Understanding. Not complete, not perfect, but real. You changed your behavior, she said. I changed how I think, I replied. Behavior follows that. And your fear? I smiled slightly. Still there, just quieter. She studied me for a long moment, then spoke in that same calm, deliberate tone that had once felt distant. You may remain. I blinked. Remain? Within this vessel, she clarified, your presence is valuable. I let out a small breath, half a laugh. That's a very polite way of saying I'm useful. It is more than that, she said. I didn't push it. Some things didn't need to be defined immediately. All right, I said. I can work with that. The system behind us hummed steadily, no longer fighting itself. The guards remained at their posts, but their presence felt less like a threat and more like part of the structure, part of the order that kept everything in place. And for the first time since I had stepped onto that ship, I didn't feel like an error in it. I glanced at her once more, then shook my head slightly. You know, I said, back home, if you accidentally bump into someone, you just apologize and move on. That would be inefficient, she said. Yeah, I smiled, but sometimes inefficient things lead to interesting